So this video is a response to several shorts, TikToks, Reels I've been making about an image that the White House released involving Pokemon, and I made the statement that Pokemon Company should try to sue the White House for this, but they likely won't because the Pokemon Company only takes legal action against smaller creators that don't have as much money and power to defend themselves. They're kind of like bullies in that they won't actually stand up to anybody that's their size, but smaller people, they have no problem trying to push around. And I've read a lot of criticism and comments in these videos, so I kind of wanted to take a bit to address some of them. So the two questions I want to ask is, does the Pokemon Company / Nintendo have a case against the White House for this? And then should they actually do this? And really quick, just to get this out of the way, this is not legal advice. I have a PhD related to engineering. I've taken some courses on like trademark, copyright, patents, but I'm not an attorney in this, so yeah, don't try to do anything. But regardless, to catch everyone up with what happened. So this is March 8th of the recording, but on March 5th, the White House Twitter account posted an image using a popular meme format saying, "Make America Great Again," which is a common slogan for the far right in America. Now, it's really important to note that in this image, they use the font for the logo of the new Pokopia game. And this includes images of various Pokemon in the background, including Pikachu and including a Pokeball on the Poke Center. And this is all going to be really important here in a bit. The next day, the Pokemon International made a statement about this, saying, "We are aware of several social content that include imagery associated with our brand. We are not involved in its creation and distribution, and no permission was granted for the use of our intellectual property. Our mission is to bring the world together, and that mission is not affiliated with any political viewpoint or agenda." Now, this is a really important statement because this pretty much does state we did not give them any permission to use our intellectual property. And I think that's a long part of the basis for making a court case against them. But with all of this information, does the Pokemon Company have a case against the White House for what they did? And the really quick answer is yes. I think they actually have three separate methods of taking a case here. So firstly, the easiest part is that this image uses actual copyrighted art from the game and from Pokemon Company, not just the font style. And to be clear, most companies don't bother copywriting fonts because that's just a very difficult thing to prove. So I think the arguments about using the font style are actually kind of not, you're missing the point. But there's a lot here that actually does violate Pokemon's copyright law, including the use of its terrain, the use of various Pokemon in there. But that kind of leads to the second one, which I think makes an even stronger case, is that the image includes a Pokeball and Pikachu, right? And these are going to be, in my opinion, a very serious effort of trademark infringement against the White House. Right, because we could argue that some Pokemon may not be very recognizable. Certain things like the design of the terrain in the tall grass maybe doesn't really constitute trademark. But the Pokeball on the Poke Center and Pikachu are probably the two most notable trademarks Pokemon has. I would say even stronger trademark than like Ash Ketchum, for instance. So the use of these in this images, I think, are pretty damning. And the third one, and this is probably the shakier one, but it's worth mentioning anyway, is that this could lead to a lawsuit for false endorsement or brand misuse, if it's considered that the images suggest that Pokemon supports the political campaign or the political message. And this is going back to the Pokemon Company's earlier statement saying they did not give them permission and that their mission is not affiliated with any political viewpoints or agendas. Now, I think this is the one you have to kind of make a bit of an argument for, because does the image actually suggest that Pokemon supports the White House or supports their political movement? That's maybe up to interpretation. That you would have to actually be able to convince legal experts on. But I think the first two are pretty strong. I think they're pretty worth addressing. Also worth addressing is I want to mention some of the comments I've been getting on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, which, follow all those, by the way. That's where I produce a lot of my content. And I think there's been two arguments that are really important here and worth talking about. So the first, and I haven't seen this too much, but it is important to point out regardless, is that governments do have very special legal protections. Suing the government is really difficult to do. Now, it's not impossible to do, But you have very like limited and specific pathways to do that, which gets extremely complicated. Now, Pokemon Company has plenty of money, they have plenty of lawyers, and especially if they were to get the Japanese government involved, which, based on what the Japanese government is doing with tariffs, I think they are paying attention to the US government in legal action. But I don't think they would get involved with this unless this really exploded further. And that kind of gets into our second point here in a bit. So this would be very difficult to do. Now, the Pokemon Company could, instead of going after the White House, try to say they're going to be going after President Trump as well. This is possible, but again, it's really tricky. Because how much of an argument are you going to say that Trump is the government? I would argue the president is not the government and they're a separate body. But again, you can see this is getting really complicated really fast. And it gets to the point where we're going to ask really soon, is it worth it? But just to get to the second comment, and this is what I've really gotten a lot of pushback on my videos, are saying this, you can't sue the White House for this because this counts as parody, which would be fair use. I do not think it does. And again, I'm not a legal expert. I could be wrong. Tell me in the comments if I am, but that's totally fine. But I think this doesn't count as parody for two main reasons. First of all, this is using actual assets. These aren't like generated ones. This isn't a drawing someone made. These are using literal assets from the game and literal iconography from Pokemon, which has been around for a very, very long time. Even if we're not paying attention to the font, which most people are paying attention to, and again, you should not, pay attention to the Pokeball, pay attention to Pikachu, pay attention to all the other Pokemon that are hidden around the image, right? Those are copyrighted. Those are a really big deal. The second point is that parody requires a level of criticism or mockery towards the Pokemon Company. I don't think there's actually an argument for that. And again, this is interpretive, so you can disagree. I think the point of the message here is towards the far-right movement in America. If it were making fun of the Pokemon Company or making fun of one of its assets or the game itself, that actually would be constituted under fair use for parody. But because there isn't any level of criticism or mockery delivered towards Pokemon or the Pokemon Company or Nintendo, it doesn't actually count as parody anymore. And I think both of those points are just really missing for the argument of parody. But this finally gets us to our last question. And this is the question of, will the Pokemon Company pursue legal action? And I know I feel like I'm wasting time now, but the answer is they almost certainly will not. I actually think the Pokemon Company has a very good legal argument for pursuing legal action. And we do know that the Pokemon Company and Nintendo like pursuing legal action. But I don't think they will against the White House, right? Because that's going to get so much publicity and so much pushback from the lawsuit. I think they would actually lose money in the long run. And I'm not even talking about like the time and money to like pay lawyers and court fees and all this stuff. I think the impression, the global impression of the Pokemon Company, of Nintendo, will be harmed from this. Even though the far-right movement in America is very unpopular, I think a lot of people will still view this as corporate outreach over governments. And I just don't think it's worth their time. I think they would win. I think they would lose money over time. The second part to an argument I think really strong for why they shouldn't is looking at the record of Trump and his administration. And this could go further than him looking for presidency. But Trump's administration has a really long record of retribution against people that the president thinks has wronged him or his administration. There's a lot of legal threats there. And I actually think, and I think I'm very realistic in this, I think if the Pokemon Company tried to sue the White House, I think Trump would actually just pursue further tariffs against all of Japan. I think it wouldn't even necessarily target like the gaming industry, which as a gamer, I don't want to see that. But I think Trump would legitimately levy harsher tariffs against Japan if the Pokemon Company sought this out. Which is not good for the Pokemon Company. It's not good for Japan. I really think this would absolutely blow up in their faces. Despite the fact that I do believe they would win the court case, there is no universe in which this is a realistically good idea for them to pursue. Right? And that does suck. I'm not saying it's okay. But you have to consider if it's worthwhile here. And I don't think it's worthwhile for the Pokemon Company or Nintendo to pursue this. It's an interesting thing to think about. I've liked the debates and some of the people. I've liked the comments, even though some of people's comments on Twitter or TikTok have been really stupid. I think some of the criticism is legitimate, and I like thinking about it. But in all seriousness, thinking about it is probably all that's going to happen. But I digress. That's the entire argument I have. Tell me in the comments if I've forgotten anything or if you disagree with something. If you disagree, that's totally fine. None of this is a big deal. And then do the YouTube stuff. Like, comment, subscribe. I'm growing pretty steadily, so if you subscribe onto this video, hopefully you'll find other videos that you'll also like. I'm trying to do a bit more long-form content, but you'll get a lot of shorts from me, as those are pretty easy for me to edit, and I'm depressed, so shorts are a lot easier than long-form. Regardless, that's it. Have a good day. I will see you all in the next video. Later. Bye.